The first vaccine was invented in 1796. It treated smallpox. In 1980, smallpox was eradicated. A disease that had changed the course of human history was gone forever because of a concerted public health effort. Polio, too, once known as childhood's greatest killer, is on its last legs. It is found in only 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and in 2019, there were only 30 reported cases, and public health efforts are going well. In 2000, the United States was declared free of measles, free of an incredibly contagious and dangerous disease. And yet, in 2019, there were 118 cases of measles in the US. But how? Vaccine hesitancy is defined as the reluctance or refusal to vaccinate, even when vaccines are available. We have beaten back diseases with the greatest weapons of modern medicine, but we are currently losing ground because people are refusing them. In many ways, vaccines have become victims of their own success because we have forgotten the diseases they prevent. We have forgotten the birth defects caused by measles. We have forgotten when stepping on a rusty nail meant death by tetanus. We have forgotten that in 1918, 10% of the world's population died in an influenza outbreak. We have forgotten a time when many women were the mothers of more dead children than living. We have forgotten, but we cannot afford to. As the percentage of the population that is vaccinated drops, we lose what is called herd immunity, which protects the vulnerable people in our society who cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons. I want to address this issue of vaccine hesitancy and suggest ways to curb it, everything from marketing to laws, because we cannot wait on this issue. We cannot wait until children with leukemia are dying of whooping coughs in countries where that disease has been a memory for more than half a century. So, who experiences vaccine hesitancy? It has always been associated with fringe political beliefs, so really far left hippies or really far right Nazis. This link can be seen with the election of anti-establishment parties in Europe being linked to a lack of belief in vaccine importance. Now, the rise of nationalism isn't what I'm here to talk to you about today, and this isn't the kind of vaccine hesitancy I'm here to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about it as it occurs in ordinary people who hold otherwise ordinary beliefs. Now, most of this vaccine hesitancy revolves around the myth, and I say myth, that vaccines cause autism. They don't. Now, this myth was catapulted into the mainstream consciousness in 1999 when Andrew Wakefield published a paper in the Lancet journal suggesting a possible link between the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, and autism. Now note that I said Andrew Wakefield and not Dr. Andrew Wakefield, because after it was discovered he purposefully tampered with the results of the experiment, which by the way only had 12 participants, his medical license was revoked and the paper was retracted. Now, in the long run, it hasn't mattered that Wakefield was disgraced and his paper discredited, because the fear has stuck in people's minds and propagated through mommy Facebook groups, harrowing accounts of bright and attentive children regressing from touch after receiving the shot. People think, how could this have happened to so many other people and not be true? The answer there is very simple. The CDC and World Health Organization's recommended date for receiving the MMR vaccine and the age when the first signs of autism appear are very, very close together. But pure coincidence is not what sad and grieving parents want to hear. They want a cause. They want something and someone to blame. So, what was the last thing that happened before their child's behavior changed? Well, they got injected with a scary syringe by a man in a white coat. That seems suspicious, doesn't it? And look at how many other parents this has happened to. And so the fear spreads. And this Fear about the safety of vaccines is exacerbated by the fact that the scientific community and the ordinary community don't speak using the same terminology. When scientists say there is no evidence of a link between vaccines and autism, people will ask for a study that proves there is no link, without realizing you can't prove a negative. In the way that I can't prove that if one of those lovely people up in the booth decided to jump out, they wouldn't be able to fly. I couldn't prove that. But I know it won't happen, and you know that too. And in the same way, scientists know vaccines do not cause autism. So how do we prevent this fear from spreading on an individual level? Now, though my personal motto is to fight fire with the fire department, people who experience vaccine hesitancy don't like competent authority figures. So in this case, we're going to have to fight it with fire. Or in this case, fight fear with fear. We have to make people more afraid of the diseases vaccines prevent than they are of autism. We need to show them more pictures like this. Part of the issue is marketing. On one side of the debate, we have wall-to-wall scaremongering, the best that money can buy, terrifying photos of children, crying mothers, everything, everything, everything. And on the other side, we have bubbly government health boards with impersonal language and smiling children. Which one is going to scare parents more? The CDC doesn't need to change its recommended date for vaccines. It needs to change its marketing. And it's not as if they don't have anything to work with. The list of things that I can think of that are scarier than polio, diphtheria, tetanus, and measles is actually pretty short. Instead of websites like this, they need more pictures like this of tetanus, the arched and breaking spine, of children in iron lungs breathing for them because they were paralyzed by polio. We need to tell them stories of children coughing themselves blue and breaking their ribs with whooping cough. We need to show them all that and see how scary Asperger's seems. Now, though this debate is often framed as one of personal liberty, I'm going to push back against that very, very far. Because we must remember that when someone decides not to vaccinate their child, it's not just them they're putting in danger. It's not even just their child. It's everyone else as well, because of herd immunity that protects people who are too weak to be vaccinated. No mother or father's personal liberties is worth the life of an immunocompromised person. As the famous saying goes, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. Once those decisions start harming other people, liberties start to dissipate. Now, it's not as if the risk run by someone not being vaccinated is low. I will give you this example. If everyone in this auditorium were unvaccinated and one person had measles, almost all of us would have been exposed to the disease by now. And of those people exposed, 90% would catch it. 90. And of those 90, 28% would succumb to the disease. Is that one person's decision to make? Because there is no greater well of wisdom in this world than internet comic strips, I will quote one for you on the accomplishments of the field of biology and medicine. The heroes of my field have slain one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And they really have. It is truly exceptional that I can say that every person in this auditorium has every expectation that every child they have or will live past the age of 5. That is not something that could have been said for the rest of human history. But we cannot keep this up if people refuse vaccines. We live in a very odd world where some mothers will walk 10 kilometers with their children in order to get them vaccinated, and others will fight their own governments so they don't have to. Now, in this whole debate, we focused on parents, their decisions, their rationale, their reasons, their feelings. But I would like to end my speech for a moment on the children this decision is being made for and how that impacts them. I want to tell you a story about a 6-year-old boy in the US state of Oregon. In 2017, he got tetanus because he was not vaccinated against the disease, and he cut his leg on a rusty nail on his parents' farm. 6 days after he cut his leg, he had to be airlifted to a hospital. He was experiencing uncontrollable muscle spasms, the clenched jaw, and the characteristic arched spine. That boy, that 6-year-old boy, was in the ICU on a ventilator for 45 days. Can you imagine the pain and fear he was experiencing? Can you imagine not being able to control your own body or breathe on your own? Can you imagine the fear that 6-year-old child felt, thinking he might die? But I will tell you, as a very good piece of news, he lived. Those hardworking doctors and nurses saved him, in part with an emergency dose of the tetanus vaccine. And when his parents got their little boy back after all of that, do you know what they all did? They refused the follow-up shot. They were willing to put their child through all of that again. And I want to ask you, do you really think that that was their decision to make? Because in my personal opinion, had that boy not been saved, his parents would have committed negligent homicide by doing that to their own child. A child who deserves all the protections of modern medicine, just like anybody else's child. Now, normally I would say you can leave the care of your fellow denizens of this earth up to doctors and nurses. We don't send them to medical school for nothing. But in this case, you have a positive moral responsibility to be vaccinated in order to protect their health, to protect the most vulnerable in our society, those who cannot be protected by vaccines. You have a moral duty to walk down to your local clinic and get all your shots and boosters and vaccinate your kid on time, just in the way that you would have a moral responsibility to save someone who would die if you didn't. And on the plus side, if you're a very good girl or boy, when you go and get your shot, you might even get a lollipop. Thank you.